Welcome to the channel. I'm Tony the Technician. Today we're going to be going into 10 more items, actually I think we might have 11 or 12, that I believe everybody should have in their shop or garage. So I've went over accessories like hose clamps, grommets, things like that. I've also went over chemicals such as brake clean, brake caliper grease, Loctite, things like that. I've also went over some materials like shop towels, microfibers, brushes, things like that. But today we're going to be getting into, if you're getting into or already do, wiring. These are just some of the basics that you need, and I really hope you guys find them helpful. Get some good ideas from it. Once again, all of these items will be linked down in the description for you guys, so if you guys are interested, it's all there for you. But let's go ahead and get into these 10 to 12 items that I've came up with. And if you guys have any input, please feel free to drop a comment down below. And if you haven't subscribed, make sure to subscribe. Let's get into this. First item's up. First of all, don't mind the drawers we're going to be looking at today. My wiring drawers are usually the most unorganized drawers. I like to stay organized, but when it comes to wiring, I'm usually getting stuff in and out so much that it gets old. So first up is I keep a lot of cables and wiring. So this was from when I did my winch install. Just some ground and positive cables. This is 4 gauge. I also have a stockpile on my shelving of 0 gauge welding cable. If you want to save a little bit of money, you can go copper clad aluminum, which is a little bit cheaper. But if you want some good quality stuff, welding cable is really the way to go because you usually get oxygen free copper, a little bit better stuff, a lot more flexible. But it all just depends on what you're doing, how much of it you're doing, and how much your budget is. But besides this, I also keep on hand stock of different smaller wiring because I have completely rewired this entire Camaro, and I had 2 sets of these, and obviously I use the red and black a little bit more. This is my second roll now. These I use for when I run relays, just because I can keep the color coding the same, so I know exactly where the cables are going or where the wires are going, and I don't just have a black attached to a yellow and things like that. So that's why I like to get this little variety so I can keep everything color matched. Like I said, this is going to be a little bit more than 10 items, but that's what we're going to call it. I also have speaker wire and all different sorts of wiring, so just depending on what type of wiring you're looking at doing or the wiring that you do will depend, but wires and cables are the first one up. Next, this wasn't on my list, but I figured I'd mention it. These are some watertight, waterproof relays that I run, which I've had pretty good success with. I've been running them for 2 years, and they haven't been bad at all. I haven't had any issues or anything like that. No, they're not the highest quality relays, but they're affordable, and they've done the job just fine. So that's just a free mention. That wasn't actually on my list. Next up are going to be lugs. So here I keep a stockpile, a bunch of different size or diameter 1/0 lugs, and then here I also keep 4 gauge lugs in here. Those are 2 of the primary larger cables that I run. Is either 4 gauge or 1/0 or 0. So wires, cables, lugs for those wires and cables. Here's another freebie that I'll throw in. This isn't on the list. This is for when I'm running connections to like my alternator or my distribution block, things like that. I like to run these bigger boots. I also keep on hand some of these inline fuse connectors, but the things that I really like are these self-resetting circuit breakers, and you can get these in different amperages. I believe these are 30 amp circuit breakers, but you can get all different amp ratings on those. So that's just some freebies. Weren't on my list either, but I could probably just make a whole another wiring video. But crimpers. So this is one of my primary crimpers for my larger lugs, 4 gauge, 1/0, whatever. This is a hammer crimper. You got this pin here that you lift up. You slide your crimp in, you drop it down on it, and then you smack this top part with a hammer, and it crimps it, gets a nice solid crimp. You can also get larger plier style crimpers, which I have one in a case somewhere. but that's my primary one for my larger lugs. But then I also keep, for my smaller wiring, a few different style strippers. I also have a self-adjusting set and one other set of strippers that I keep in my work bag down there. But just different variations with the stripper on top, stripper on bottom, crimper on top, crimper on bottom, things like that, just depending on the scenario that I find myself in, whether I'm working in an open space or I'm working up in a tight dash or something like that. Different styles of wire strippers and crimpers. And then I also want to mention, while I'm over here, solder connectors. These things are fantastic. Anything and everything that I could use them for on the Camaro build, I did. When I installed all of my ditch lights, bumper lights, fog lights, winch, all of the wiring on my new Colorado, these were used. I just constantly buy these. These are some of my favorite things I've purchased in the last few years. You can get multiple different sizes, but the solder's already built in. You simply heat it up and it seals it. It's watertight, and it gets a nice solid connection, much better than just using your standard style crimp connector. Then you have heat shrink. I keep variations of different size and color heat shrink. I have blue, white, red and black, and then like you saw over here, I had some, and then I also keep a ton more in here for all different size cables and wires. The other thing is wire protection, which I use a lot of Alex Tech, which is a brand on Amazon, and you can either get it full sleeved or split loom and different diameters. So this actually, it's nylon braided. It's got good heat protection. I run some of it right next to my exhaust and it does just fine. The wire's not brittle or anything like that, but it does split open. It looks way better than that plastic split loom that cracks and becomes all brittle. And I just have different diameter here. I have this bag completely stocked full of different sizes, and I've just ran through almost all of my stock. And then here's the full loom. It just expands and slides over. It's not a split loom or anything like that. And then I always use heat shrink at the end. As you can see, wiring harness there, some of it here. It's just a lot better looking than your plastic split loom. I have it all running here. I got heat protection on this one because it goes down to the starter. Sits right next to the exhaust, so it looks nice. It works really well. Anything that's ran through the firewall or through the car is layered with it, and so far it's held up really well. I've been using it probably for the last 6 years. So split loom. And then another thing, zip ties. I keep a ton of zip ties. Here's just some. Underneath this wiring is just an entire bag of about 1,000 zip ties of different sizes. So just different zip ties. And then soldering iron. Now, I had an old soldering gun and I used it all the time. I got rid of it when I started using the solder connectors, but I picked this one up from Capri just in case I want to solder and I can't use one of those solder connectors. So just a nice little kit from Capri. This pulls out and then you can drop it in this stand and then you can angle it however you want. Really nice little kit here. Comes with a little deflector, solder, different tips. And I keep some more solder up here. The other thing are the helping hands. I used to use that one from Harbor Freight, but I couldn't stand it. It was constantly tipping over. If you only solder once a year, once every great while, once in a great while, it's probably fine. But I was doing quite a bit of soldering at the time, and so I picked this up off of Amazon. Lot more versatile. This one has 4 hands. You can get multiple different sizes. This one's a Kodo, I don't know, and they're just magnetic, so you can actually move these arms around anywhere on this metal plate. Works way better than the helping hands from Harbor Freight. So we went over wires, cables, lug crimpers, lugs, soldering iron, solder connectors, crimpers, strippers, heat shrink, split loom, zip ties, helping hands, and then some freebies, you know, the relays and circuit breakers and inline fuse holder. And then last up, for today's video is the heat gun. This one I got from Tack Life back when they were allowed to sell on Amazon 5 years ago. You won't find them anymore, but you can get a $15 heat gun from Harbor Freight. I know a lot of guys in my industry that actually use them all the time. They run them almost every single day. They last about a year or two, then they take a dump. $15 later, they got another one. You don't have to go all out. If it's something that you use every day, all day, let's say you wrap cars, probably not the route that you want to go. You want to get something a little bit nicer. But this is just a cheap guy too. 3 different speed settings, and then you got your temperature range there on the back. You got different attachments for the nose. I don't really use this one. I do use this one quite a bit. It slides over and it's just a deflector. So like when I was wiring up my new LED headlights, I had to splice into the side markers, and I had to do all of my soldering right here with those solder connectors, and I didn't want to hit my filter or hit the paint with the heat gun at full temp, so I used that deflector, and that works great in those tight situations where you don't want to be heating up, you know, plastics or anything like that around the area that you're working with. So a good little heat gun, doesn't have to be anything, you know, super expensive. Absolutely fantastic to have. So that is like, you know, 10 to 15 items for wiring that I use on a pretty normal basis, and I find extremely handy to have on hand. That way I'm not constantly running to the store or having to order something online. I try to keep a stockpile. So like my split loom wire protection, I need to order more of that. I like to keep, you know, 3/4 inch, 3/8, 1/4 inch for smaller single wires up to larger cables if I'm running multiple wires in a big loom. That's really handy. And then the zip ties, you know, keep it nice and neat. And then I throw heat shrink on the ends of them, keeps everything looking nice and neat. And using solder connectors or soldering is always better than crimping, so I try to do that whenever possible. So that's why I keep all of this stuff on hand. If you guys found this video helpful, please make sure to smash that thumbs up. Once again, I'll try to have as many of these items linked down in the description for you guys as possible. And if you guys haven't subscribed, make sure to subscribe, and I'll see you guys next time.